One of the most exciting yet intimidating times as a collector is when you're making the plunge to acquire your first luxury watch. And how do you navigate this is usually the question. Where should I begin? Now, part of the reason why I love watches is because of the individual expression of deciding to collect one watch versus the other. But if you just wanted a jumping off point, or say maybe a family member of mine was asking, okay, where should I begin with my luxury watch journey? This would be a list that I would recommend as some very safe, great first luxury watch choices. So around 3 years ago, we looked at this topic, but we didn't have the same amount of watches available to us, and there's a lot of updates since then. So I wanted to revisit this because the market has completely changed since the last time we published that video. A couple points of criteria as I was trying to develop this list. One is I don't want these watches to be going over $10,000. There might be one exception I'll make here, but I think you'll hopefully let it slide. Also, these have to be safe choices, watches that are going to work in a variety of scenarios, most likely maybe have some iconic status, a long understanding amongst collectors that these are some very safe, but also great picks to really do anything if you wanted to pick this one watch to maybe be the only watch that you could possibly own. Now, before we kick things off, I do want to mention a new feature on our website that we're really trying to improve, and that is on our live chat. So you may have been to our website and been looking around for some watches, but now we have over 12 hours a day someone on live chat. These are watch enthusiasts, members of our team that are very knowledgeable about the products that we sell. It's very important to me that if you guys have questions, we have the answers and can have someone that you can actually talk to in real time online for any watch that you're specifically looking at. So if you have any questions, head over to the site, be happy to help you out. So if I could argue maybe the one brand that probably is going to be the safest and maybe the first brand that comes to mind when people think of luxury watches, it's going to be Rolex. So we have to talk about a few here. One that I would recommend first is going to be the Rolex Oyster Perpetual. The Rolex Oyster Perpetual now sits at the entry door of pricing for the brand and still delivering probably one of the most viable watches from an everyday point of view. You have a variety of different case sizes. I would say the sweet spot for most people probably watching this video would be the 36 or the 41 millimeter options. You now have the latest generation of calibers with the 3230 on the inside. Now the caliber might change depending on what Oyster Perpetual case you're going for, but for the ones we're speaking to here, that will be what you'll be looking at. 36 is going to wear like classic Rolex Oyster cases of decades prior. Then you have the 41 that offers up a bit more of some modernity to the concept. 70+ hour power reserve, superlative chronometer is going to work within COSC parameters to have great accuracy, 904L stainless steel, and in addition, a variety of dial colors that you can choose from. So you can basically have the choice of deciding, do I want something that's more playful or do I want something that is going to be more down the middle like a blue or a black? And speaking of black dials, we have to talk Rolex Explorer. If I had to pinpoint the one and done concept from Rolex, the one watch that could basically do it all and you could just walk away from watch collecting for the rest of your life, this might be the one. Now, also interesting in the modern collection for the Explorer family, you have two different size options. That is not something that we've really seen in the past from Rolex. Usually it is going to be either 36, we saw the transition to 39. Now we have a 36 and a 40 millimeter available simultaneously. Many of the same specifications when it comes to the movement on the inside of the Oyster Perpetual are going to be carried over here. The dial presentation ultimately going to be altered to that 369 layout. I also find the Explorer to be slightly more dressy. It's harder to pinpoint. I think I talked about this in a previous video more recently, that the 369 and just the way that the lume sits in the watch here compared to the Oyster Perpetual, where the lume is more on display within those rectangular indicators. Here it's more sleek, understated, and I think that allows it to be dressed up even more compared to some of the Oyster Perpetuals that will vary also depending on what dial you go for. And then for the final recommendation for Rolex, we had to include this. This is the Rolex Submariner, and then also the Submariner Date. The Submariner Date is going to be over $10,000, but the Rolex Submariner is going to be retailing at $9,100. This is where I was mentioning at the beginning of the video, there's one exception to that $10,000 rule, and I think this is going to be more than acceptable. Hopefully you'll give me some leniency here on letting this one slide. I mean, what else can be said about this watch? You have an icon to the highest degree. Fit and finish is some of the best in class, if not the best in class. The bracelet is phenomenal. It's a professionally capable watch, yet practical in daily scenarios, no matter your lifestyle. And how I like to look at the Submariner is, yes, it is something that is frequently talked about. It may have lost some of its novelty over the years, given its popularity, but same as going to your favorite restaurant and picking the same dish every time, yes, it might not wow you like it did the first time you saw it or the first time you ate it. The same thing could be said about the Submariner. Just because it's been traveled before, talked about a lot, maybe you've enjoyed it on previous occasions, doesn't stop you from enjoying it again. And now we have to shift to another brand that is on the short list of brands to consider when you're looking at your first luxury watch. That is Omega. Similar to Rolex, Omega has many different entry points and there's a lot to get lost in. One of the watches you have to consider is the Aquaterra. This is a watch that so many people have decided on as their first luxury watch. But nowadays there are many to choose from. You have the shades models, you have the teakwood models, and then recently we also got a new release from the brand with the black lacquer dials. And this is gonna actually be my choice for a couple of reasons. Number one, this probably gives you the most flexibility on wearing situations for any Aquaterra thus far, given a couple things. One is that the dial surface is going to be more standard and not going to potentially clash as much. I don't think the teakwood is going to get in the way of being able to wear that watch every single day, but I think with this black sleek dial, you probably have even more viability in that regard. You also have two different case sizes to choose from. You have a 38mm option and a 41mm option. Both come with 150 meters of water resistance. The main differentiator outside of size between these watches is going to be the 8800 movement on the 38mm option and the 8900 movement on the 41mm option. And one final point about these black lacquer dials is they do incorporate some micro adjustment in the clasp, now being able to be done without any tools as well. So we'll come back to Omega a little bit later, but I just want to diversify maybe some of the list here. So we're going to shift over to another brand, IWC, looking at their Mark 20. The Mark 20 was the follow-up to the Mark 18, released in 2022, and it delivered many upgrades compared to the previous generation of the Mark series. The watch comes in a 40mm diameter, but the lug-to-lug was slimmed down in terms of its length. You're at 49mm. Not going to be the shortest of lengths for a 40mm watch, but much more manageable compared to the previous Mark 18. Water resistance was also boosted up to 100 meters for the Mark 20. And then you also have a movement that is going to be utilized on the inside, the automatic 32111. This comes with 5 days of power reserve while still operating at 28,800 vibrations per hour. So there's no slowing of the beat frequency to still achieve that nice reserve. Nice variety of dial choices for the Mark 20, unbeatable legibility, great bracelet that you can opt for, and also having some on-the-fly adjustment there. And then also this thing can work with basically any strap that you throw at it. Moving along to another brand that I think needs to be mentioned here, and that is Grand Seiko. I struggled identifying what is the perfect Grand Seiko watch for a list like this, and there were three watches I was considering. One was the SBGM 221, so that is the 4 hertz powered mechanical GMT, under $5,000, an amazing buy from the brand. But then you have another watch to consider, the SBGA 211, the Snowflake. That was the watch that I would say was the first wave of establishing popularity of Grand Seiko in other markets outside of Japan in the last decade. And then the other watch that I wanted to consider, and that was ultimately the watch that I decided to mention here, it's the SBGA 413, known as the Spring. And this was a watch that was released within the Four Seasons collection. When that happened, that was the second wave after the Snowflake, where I really started to see the perception of Grand Seiko change and popularity for the brand surge. So why is this watch so special? I think a few things here that I love about this watch. One is going to start with the case. This is the 62GS case. This is my favorite case from Grand Seiko overall. It wears amazing on so many different wrists. It's 40mm, so it's not small, but reasonable lug to lug. And then you also have a interesting silhouette. One, you do not have a traditional bezel, so you just look at how this crystal will shoot up straight from that central case. It's very unique, and I love the way that it's able to play with these harsh angles on the case that also feel elegant. And then you have the dial, which I don't even know if I can go any further about expressing my love for this dial. There is this sporadic texture that feels balanced in its imperfection to almost feel perfect. If that can make any sense to you all, but then also you are getting this color chameleon-like feel with this piece that is unlike almost any other Grand Seiko dial except a few others. But this one, when I first got hands-on with this watch, I thought, no way. I saw the press images, it looked pink, it's not for me. But the way it's able to play with the light, silver to pink, it tells a story at every single angle. Then you have the fact that it's a titanium case and bracelet, and then the 9R65 is a tour de force of technical achievement and engineering. You have a 70-hour power reserve. It's going to run within 15 seconds a month of perfect accuracy, and you're combining all of these elements of engineering into one idea. It has the perks of a mechanical watch with having its endless power supply coming with the winding through a mainspring, so no battery required. But then on the other side, it's able to counteract some of the challenges that come with mechanical watches, things like friction and also accuracy. So with a quartz oscillator and then being able to have an electromagnetic impulse being sent to a glide wheel to basically act as a frictionless brake. So you're basically getting a self-sufficient movement that will wind with your wear while also being ultra accurate, coming with no expense of friction. Now we jump back to Omega, and the one Omega watch we have to include is going to be the Omega Speedmaster. There are now a few new updates to the Omega Speedmaster line since the previous video. So we did mention that there was in 2021 the release of the Omega Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch, now with the 3861 on the inside. But since then, there's now a new white dial version. You've also seen some upgrades with the bracelet as well. So sapphire sandwich option as well as a hezolite, there'll be around a $1,000 price difference. You're looking at $7,000 for it on the bracelet for the hezolite and then $8,000 for the sapphire version. 42mm case across all these different models. These watches though wear like a dream. 47.5mm for the lug to lug there. That is around the same lug to lug as the Tudor Black Bay 58. So that's a watch that's praised for being this small and medium-sized dive watch. You have the 42mm Speedmaster matching it on that length side, which makes this probably one of the most wearable cases universally in the entire industry. This is also going to incorporate a master chronometer coaxial escapement within the professional Moonwatch, which was a huge development, and then now having a new white dial to choose from. With all of these models, you have some slight differentiators. The white dial is basically going to mirror the sapphire version perfectly. In between those two models, you have a few things to call out. One is going to be the bracelet interior links are going to be polished. You also have an applied Omega logo on the dial, sapphire crystal on top, and then also having a sapphire exhibition case back to see the 3861 on the back side. The bracelets are going to be basically the same apart from the clasp. It does have a slight difference on the white. You have this black and linear pattern on the white dial, where the linear pattern on the sapphire version is not going to have that blackened effect. Then for the hezolite version, printed dial completely, and then not going to have the polishing on those center links, and of course not being able to see the movement on the back side, but you do get this cool inscription of the NASA reference, and this being flight tested by NASA back in the 1960s. The other update is the micro adjustment in the clasp. So you have around 3mm or so of on-the-fly adjustment within that clasp with a small little trigger on the flip side of that clasp. In the past few years, Tudor has been very busy upgrading the Black Bay collection, and that has come with a new 41mm Black Bay, really reimagining what the concept of the Black Bay is going to be going forward. A few things to call out here is going to be a new upgraded movement as well as concept of a master chronometer now being available in the 41mm Black Bay. So we saw the black monochrome version this year. We also saw the burgundy version last year, and this is the sign of the future for Tudor, and this is more of a recent development, and it will be interesting to see how they incorporate master chronometers going forward. Outside of Omega, this is really the only brand that is doing this for a whole lineup of watches. With this new version of the Black Bay, you have an upgraded bracelet, different crown design. Also, we're going to have some slight different notching to the bezel. Dial finish is going to be slightly different as well. But another huge benefit for this new Black Bay is going to be how it wears on the wrist. Now, 41mm might seem like it's going to be too large for many people out there. And if you've worn the previous Black Bays, probably might be the case, considering that those watches were 15mm thick once they transitioned to the MT calibers. But with this new version, you have 1.5 millimeters being cut off the top to allow it to be 13.6mm thick, so not the thinnest of watches, but way more manageable than it was previously, and further a 49.3mm lug to lug, which with the multi-link bracelet, I think actually wears maybe even more compact than that, or no larger or longer than that. Further, you have a 70-hour power reserve and the T-Fit clasp to go along with it, which is probably some of the best on-the-fly adjustment in the entire industry. I was debating on where to start this video in terms of price range and where would be the entry point where somebody could get into this concept of luxury. And it's a loaded term. It's kind of a nasty word in some ways too. And I don't want to be the decider of all things luxury, but if I had to try to get around the semantics of classifying that term and what would constitute it, I would say this watch also is a fit, and that is the Longines Spirit Zulu Time. When the Zulu Time was released, I thought this was a huge turning point where Longines, yes, established history. Many people are familiar with the brand, but this is where I felt that there was a sense of what the enthusiasts wanted with this watch and how Longines was able to deliver and use this as a springboard to basically just knock out release after release over the last few years. The Zulu Time was also a watch that looked back to a part of their history that I would argue is as rich as any when it comes to pilot and aviation watches, as well as GMT watches. Back in 1925, Longines released the first dual time zone watch in a wristwatch form with their Zulu. Keep in mind, this is a quarter century before many other traveling and GMT watches were unveiled in the 1950s, a time period where we mostly crowned the genesis of most GMT watches that we know today. The Zulu now is available in a 39mm case, a 42mm case. You have S&G models to choose from, as well as a new titanium case to choose from in the 39mm format. Another huge reason for the success of this watch was the movement on the inside. You are getting a COSC certified movement, also a proprietary caliber that is used by Longines, assembled in their facility, and going to be of the true GMT variety. Before this, there was really only one door in town to go to when it came to a GMT, a true GMT watch in the luxury segment, and that was the Tudor Black Bay GMT. This answered the call for many enthusiasts to have an alternative while also being cheaper in the process and a ton of history to lean on. The original Zulu watch came out in 1925. Hans Wilsdorf didn't register the name Tudor until 1926. Another watch that we have to talk about is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. This is a no-brainer, and I would argue maybe the most complete watch for around $6,000. If you had somebody that was a dear friend of mine, I have $6,000 to spend, what's a watch that I should buy? This would be one of the first watches that I would recommend without question. For years, this watch was a representation of the entry door of luxury dive watches, and still to this point today is right there. You have a 42mm case, 13.5mm in thickness, lug to lug pretty manageable at 49.7mm considering the 42mm diameter. You get 300 meters of water resistance, professionally capable with the ceramic bezel and then a beautiful wave ceramic dial. Now getting a variety of different dial colors to choose from. Since the previous video, we've also seen the release of the green dial version, which is spectacular in person. On the inside is the Omega 8800 caliber 55-hour power reserve. This is a master chronometer watch, sapphire crystal with double AR, and you basically feel like you can just see this watch at every single angle. You're gonna have no obstruction of view with that AR treatment that just looks phenomenal. Next up, we have an iconic chronograph that is the representation I think of when I imagine this brand, and that is the Breitling Navitimer. The Breitling Navitimer now is going to be available in a wide variety of sizes, so you now have a 41mm option, 43mm option, and a 46mm option. One thing I love about the modern Navitimer is because of these different case sizes, a watch that was always perceived as only being available and viable for people with larger wrists now can be worn by basically any wrist size that you can imagine. On the inside, you have the automatic Breitling B01, their in-house mechanical chronograph movement that is going to be superb in its look for its price range, but also in terms of its specification. 70+ hours of power reserve and being COSC certified. And beyond all of this, you can't overstate the importance that Breitling had in pilot watch design. And one other watch that I want to mention here to close is from Cartier, and it is the Cartier Santos de Cartier. This is one of my favorite watches from the brand. I know many people, when they think of Cartier, perhaps they think of the Tank first, but for me, I've always been a fan of the Santos. And I think the Santos as well, for most people, might be a better choice for a first luxury watch, given that it can be worn in scenarios where maybe you need to dress up, but also can dress down. It has some sporty upside with 100 meters of water resistance. The bracelet gives it a bit more oomph in the sports category to go along with it, and the history of Alberto Santos Dumont when he requested a watch, a first pilot watch, and some would argue the first wristwatch. The Santos was the line that established Cartier even before the Tank, of which is one of the most important luxury names in the industry with watches that are hard to beat. You also have a medium version and a larger version. The on-the-fly adjustment with the bracelet sizing is very nice. And I'll throw in the two-tone option as something else to consider. This is one of the coolest looking two-tone watches in the industry, in my opinion. One other final thing I'll say too, though, about maybe a drawback of this watch is it does scratch like crazy. But my stance on things like this is that when I scratch my watch, I know it's mine then. And watches are ultimately meant to be worn. But all right, guys, that is my video here today looking at some great first luxury watch purchases in 2024. If you enjoyed the video, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, give this video a thumbs up. Really do appreciate that. Is there another watch that you would say would be on a short list like this as a first luxury watch purchase? Did you decide on something else, or what would you recommend for a first luxury watch purchase for someone out there? Leave a comment down below. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldessar.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, full factory warranty for all the products that we offer, team working around the clock on live chat to answer any of your questions, and also allows us to keep doing what we're doing here and producing content. So if you are in the market for a watch, we'd absolutely love to have your business. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.